Hello, everyone. For those who are joining us live and for anyone watching in the future, welcome. We're glad you are here. The American Association of Suicidology welcome all of you to this live event discussion about the gun suicide in city, associated factors, and prevention strategy. Over the next hour, we aim to increase your knowledge and understanding of firearm related suicide data and protective factors in US cities. We appreciate this material may be personal to you. We also understand diverse perspectives are critical to a conversation about suicide preventions. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to hear from our distinguished panel of speakers today. Kelley Island, a Survivor Network Fellow at Everytown for Gun Safety, offering support for other gun violence survivors. Dr. Megan Toll, Deputy Research Director, led the work on Everytown for Gun Safety Research, recently released a report, Gun Suicide in City, the lesser known side of the city gun violence. We're also going to hear from about that, as well as hearing from Sarah Joy Albrecht, co-founder and executive director of Hold My Guns, who is working to bring education and safe storage access in local communities. Recognizing gun suicide as a public health problem in city, understanding the type of city and group of people within them that are most affected can inform prevention efforts. Now, later on, we will have an opportunity for you to ask questions. So without further ado, let's welcome our first speaker, Kelley Island, to hear about her story of the impact of gun suicide and the work she does. Hi, Kelley.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me here today. Another mother, survivor mother, Dorothy Pausch, wrote about her son's suicide. And she said that victims of suicide may not be innocent in the same way as homicide victims are, but they are our loved ones whose lives mattered, who were lost in pain and darkness and did not know how to ask for help. They deserve our attention and compassion too. On February 7th, 1989, my 18-year-old son Leslie died by gun suicide. I've now had 33 years to think about and live with its effects. In the beginning, I had no idea such a potentiality awaited my son, my only child. He grew up in the same little rural hometown that I did, and it's a small copper mining community of about 8,000 people. He'd grown up hunting and fishing with his dad. He's a happy kid, kind of a natural comedian. When he was small in the 1970s, when the NRA was geared toward sporting safety for firearms, he took their safety training course, and later he took it again in Boy Scouts. And he also got a lot of safety training from his dad. We did lock up our guns and we did store the ammo separately. But during a move, several of our belongings disappeared as we moved boxes between households. These items were not immediately discovered because they weren't all unpacked immediately. It was later, once we had moved to Tucson, that I found that one of the missing items was a .22 pistol that my son used to end his life. Leslie's death was a shock because on the surface, things appeared to be pretty normal, given that he was an 18-year-old young man. But of course, hindsight is 20/20. And now I recognize certain things that at the time I chalked up to teenage angst. Several things impacted him far more deeply than I knew at the time, and personal losses piled up that he just couldn't deal with. The final straw was the ending of his long-term relationship with a girl. As young men often don't, he didn't talk about it, and yes, I could see he was sad. but he didn't appear devastated, and I thought that he would, as most of us do, snap out of it. But he chose to make the impulsive decision to end his life, and it changed so many things when he did. Just weeks prior to his death, he had made a neat list of restaurants that delivered takeout food, and he taped it up by the phone in our glasses cabinet in the kitchen. When people were coming from out of town for his funeral, I was just so out of it that I couldn't comprehend cooking and feeding guests. My husband suggested calling for delivery, so I dialed our favorite restaurant, and the person on the other end answered compassionate friends. I apologized for misdialing and hung up and redialed. I got the same person, compassionate friends. Again, I apologized, but I asked before I hung up, what is compassionate friends? The lady on the other end said, yes, we are a support group for parents whose children have died. I had no idea such support existed, because why would I? But that mistake led me on paths to healing I didn't even know existed. That mistake affirmed that the universe and my son were there to support me, though then I couldn't see that, and now I do. The other day I was in the kitchen and I dropped a little tiny glass on my tile kitchen floor, and it shattered into what seemed like 1,000 pieces. As I was picking those pieces up, it occurred to me that grief and its aftermath are exactly like that glass. I too was shattered, and I did pick up pieces large and small. Some shards were so small that they were almost dust. I recognized that I could glue the glass back together, but that it would never be the same because some of the pieces would always be missing. If someone had told me then that 33 years later, I would still be picking up the pieces of my life, I don't think I could have handled that. I believe I might have chosen the same path my son did to avoid that knowledge. And yes, your brain knows that you will never be the same, but often I have learned the brain and heart are like an estranged couple when you're going through the grief process. They don't talk to each other. When I reach out to help others, I don't tell them they will also take 1,000 paths to return to a good life, because some don't, some can't. When someone asks me now how I survived my son's death, I can't answer it in one sentence. I can't tell people that they are going to choose many doors that will lead them to a healing place, and that their path will be much different than mine. It's too much to wrap a brain around. Currently, I'm a volunteer for Everytown for Gun Safety Research's Be Smart program, which is the education arm of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Be Smart focuses on teaching adults safe firearms storage. I'm also a peer support survivor for Everytown's peer support group for gun violence survivors as well. I'm going to end by saying that I'm so pleased to be part of something that studies and educates people about suicide and its impacts. Our loved ones' lives matter, and they deserve our attention and compassion. Thank you for all you're doing to shine a light on suicide and bring it out of the shadows. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelley, for your inspiring and touching story. I think my tears started to shed a little bit. I'm sure audience out there will listen to this. You feel inspired and thinking about how can we actually prevent this for our children and for other people that they love. So thank you so much, Kelley.
Thank you.
Let's welcome our next speaker, Dr. Megan J. Oto, on stage. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Kelley, for your partnership in this work and for starting us off with your story. I'm next going to present some research. So we can pull up the PowerPoint, that'd be great. Thank you so much. So the research that I'm sharing today is on a report that Everytown recently released on September 8th entitled Gun Suicide, the Lesser Known Side of City Gun Violence. And just to give some background on the objectives of this report, we aim to share and analyze new, previously unavailable data on gun suicides in America's cities. We also hoped to understand the magnitude of this problem and identify hotspots for focused interventions, to explore factors that play a role in gun suicides in cities, and to identify solutions, including some that can be city-specific. So through my presentation today, I'm hoping to provide an overview of the topic and the methods we use to analyze it, talk about some high-level trends and influential factors, and wrap up with recommendations. And as I think Rachel mentioned at the beginning, there's a report that goes along with this presentation that we'll make sure everyone has the link to as well if you're interested in learning more. So before I jump into the specific findings from this report, we'll just provide an overview of gun suicide across the country and what we know from the data. We know that nearly 24,000 people die by gun suicide each year, with risk factors including serious mental illness, social isolation, stressful life events, and more. But gun access makes suicide particularly fatal. Without a gun, 4% of suicide attempts result in death, and with a gun, 90% do. We also often think about gun suicides as a rural problem and gun homicides as a city problem, but the populations impacted by gun suicide are diversifying. This has been happening, a trend that's been happening where more racially diverse and age diverse folks are dying by gun suicide over the past 10 years, but especially after the COVID pandemic hit, this is an increasing problem. And also we know that cities lack the data to understand the scope of this public health problem. Most of our data on gun deaths in cities comes from police departments who track gun homicides, but not gun suicides in the same way. Hospitals often have this information, but of course it's protected and not publicly available. So cities haven't had this information before to understand the scope of the problem. So to fill this gap, Everytown and NYU accessed and analyzed never before released CDC gun suicide data in over 750 studies for this recent report. I'll just brush over the methodology here for this crowd. Happy to answer any more questions in the follow-up. But again, NYU accessed restricted CDC data files. They're previously restricted because the CDC wants also to protect victim identities. And so when counts are lower than 10, they're often suppressed. But we had special access to receive the data this time. So we were able to include a time span that was mostly from 2016 to 2020. Again, over 750 US cities with populations of 50,000 and above. And we largely use descriptive analyses, but also regression analyses to analyze these findings. And starting off with the big picture, we were able to find that after an 11% increase over the past decade, today nearly 20 people die by gun suicide each day in US cities. Across the country overall, of every 10 gun deaths, we know that 6 are gun suicides. In cities, we didn't know what this breakup looked like in the past, again, because mostly gun homicide data was available. But now with this data, we can understand that 4 of every 10 gun deaths in a city is a person dying by gun suicide. And this is important because while it's lower than the national trend and also lower than rural communities, as we've previously understood, 4 out of every 10 gun deaths being a suicide is a big portion, and it's not yet incorporated in city strategies for addressing gun violence comprehensively, and this points out the necessity of doing so. So here we have a map where you can begin to see that the rate of people who die by firearm suicide in cities varies widely. You can see some of them are clustering in Florida from this first glance, for example, and fewer of them being in the Northeast. And in the slides to come, we'll talk about why some of those patterns occur. We can also see that the rate of people who die by firearm suicides in cities varies widely by looking at the data in a different way. When you go into the report, there's an interactive dashboard and you can type in your city's name. And if it's included in these 750 cities, you can see the specific rate and how it compares to other cities as well. The overall US city gun suicide rate is about 6 per 100,000 people, but this varies quite a bit from city to city. For example, Bradenton, Florida's rate is 34.5, and New York City is the lowest, around 0.7 per 100,000 people. So what are some of the factors that are impacting this? The first that we saw is the strength of gun laws. Cities and states with the strongest gun laws have approximately 50% lower rates of people who die by gun suicide than cities and states with the weakest laws. We also found an association with gun shops and licensed dealers. Cities with the most gun shops per person have nearly 4 times higher rates of people who die by gun suicide than cities with the fewest. We also found that this relationship is particularly strong and remains strong even after adjusting for other known factors to be associated with gun suicide. Things like the percentage of residents who are white, veterans, 65 and older, and economically disadvantaged. And one important thing that this points out for us is the importance of understanding that gun shops and dealers can be credible messengers in recognizing precursors to suicide in folks that might be buying guns or helping folks understand safe storage practices. There are also patterns by region and city size, whereby cities in the Northeast have the lowest rates of people who die by gun suicides, and cities in the South have the highest rates. The largest cities also have the lowest rates of people who die by gun suicide, and smaller cities have higher rates. And this matches on to what we understand about suicide rates being particularly high in rural communities. Smaller cities, too, tend to be more dispersed. They have fewer economic resources. It's harder to get to, different support services, which are all similar trends to rural communities as well. One more novel thing that we found through this analysis is that cities with the most walkable neighborhoods and parks have about half the rate of people who die by gun suicide. Walkability is determined based on the amount of time it takes for the average resident to walk to different resources like the pharmacy, a grocery store, doctor's offices, etc. So this is a measure of distance to things, but also the availability and accessibility of resources. And then parks is an important one for us to recognize as well. In cities, sometimes a park can be a quiet space that someone can go and reflect. It's also an opportunity to exercise and to be with community, all of which can be really valuable for mental health too. We also think that this is an important thing for cities to understand because many cities across the country are already exploring the role of parks and green spaces in reducing risks for gun homicides. And this shows that there may be added benefits for reducing the risks of gun suicide as well. So with those new findings, what are our recommendations? The first is that responses to city gun violence must include suicide prevention strategies to make a holistic impact on this public health problem. Several policies can be really valuable here, including extreme risk laws, waiting periods, background checks, secure storage, and voluntary do not buy lists. Secure firearm practices are also key. This includes unloading, locking, and separating guns from ammunition when storing them. Third-party storage can also be quite valuable. And then, as Kelley described, Everytown's Be Smart program can be helpful here too in spreading the word of the importance of secure storage and helping to train folks on how to do that. As I referenced before, credible messengers are also key in recognizing the precursors to firearm suicide and also connecting folks to resources that they need. These can be different in different communities, and it's important to recognize how they might shift in cities or within certain communities in cities. So gun shop owners can be credible messengers, veterans can, doctors, police officers, barbers and hairstylists, and street outreach workers can be valuable too. And then, of course, resources matter here too. Cities can be addressing this public health problem by increasing resources for mental health care providers, support groups, green spaces, and local data. And with that, I'll thank everyone and make some space for our next presenter.
Thank you, Megan. That's a wonderful sharing you have. I'm so glad that you share with us this insightful data. They really help us to understand the impact of gun violence. And also those recommendations is very helpful for us to know how we can use those resources that's available out there to preventing and reducing suicide. So thank you so much, Megan. All right, now we are going to welcome our last speaker to join us on stage, Sarah Joy. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Joy Albrecht, and I'm the founder and executive director for the nonprofit or 501c3 Hold My Guns. And what we do is we partner with gun shops across the United States to provide voluntary firearm storage during times of personal need, such as during deployment, a move to a new property, or maybe even providing emergency housing for an at-risk foster child, or during times of crises in the home. And that time of crises in the home might not even be the gun owner. It might be a teenager. It might be someone who's experiencing postpartum depression. And so what we do is we provide compassionate support to gun owners so that they can manage their private matters before they become public ones. You can find more out about our work at holdmyguns.org, and I encourage you to do that. We only have a short amount of time here today. But what I want you to know is that we believe that suicide prevention is a message of hope. And it is my joy to be here today. And I'm really grateful to hear Kelley's story and to learn more about the research that Meg has provided. And I wanted to share a little bit about why I started Hold My Guns. So I am a range safety officer and I'm a mom of 5. I have I have a distinguished expert, 2 experts and 2 sharpshooters. My kids have always been involved with shooting sports. And I continue to volunteer with a youth league where we train kids ages 8 to 18 in firearm safety and marksmanship and good sportsmanship. And so in 2018, we lost a 18-year-old friend to suicide by firearm. It was not the first time that we have lost a loved one to firearm, but in this particular to suicide. But in this particular case, my kids came to me and they said, "Mom, we care about preserving rights. We care about the ability to shoot and enjoy that sport, but our friend is dead. And so how can we help provide compassionate support to gun owners in a stigma-free way that would encourage them to make life-affirming choices?" And so I met with a firearms attorney here in Pennsylvania, and he met with a representative at the ATF, and we came up with a plan that would allow for FFLs to store firearms in a way that is professional and that is compliant with federal, state, and local laws. We are really excited. In the past year, we've had several partnering shops open, and our goal is to have a partnering shop at least in all 50 states, and if not every major city, which is wonderful and relevant to our conversation today. Currently, we have partners in Washington State, Wyoming, Georgia, Massachusetts, and Missouri. When I was thinking about what we can do in order to help create storage for individuals, knowing that not everyone has friends or family members who are able to help with this, I got in touch with Kathy Barber, who did the Lethal Means study at Harvard University. And by the way, she is a delight to speak with, and she shares the same passion that I do for bringing hope to people during times of crises. And it was very sobering to me that 82.5% of suicides using a firearm it results in death. And so just understanding the lethality of firearms, of course, which is why gun owners carry a firearm in the first place. It's important to recognize that, though, and that's why it was why I wanted to take leadership and to found Hold My Guns and to provide this option to our community. It's important to note that there are 1.7 million defensive gun uses that happen each year. And that is a new study that just came out on September 9th. It was released by Reason Magazine. They did an article. It's easy to find it that way. And so balancing risk and readiness is something that we understand in the firearms community. And we want to understand from a culturally informed perspective some of the obstacles that people have when they think about, should I be storing a firearm? And so that's the approach that we take. We see gun shops as a protective factor. And so I am excited to see when gun shops open in a community, because I know that there are people who genuinely care. Gun shops are a protective factor because the customers there are out of isolation. They're part of a community of veterans and first responders and Americans who care about making sure that they're protecting what they love. And so there are a lot of opportunities there to foster those protective factors, whether it's creating a fitness challenge or a community cleanup day through for the customers there. There are many opportunities to increase protective factors, let alone that gun owners shoot together and they train together and they share values. So there are so many things that we like to elevate there. And I just want to kind of end on a thought, because I know we're really short on time. And that is that something that we talk about a lot at Hold My Guns is the way that we talk about suicide prevention. And I forgot to mention too that I'm a QPR instructor, and that we have trained over 200 individuals in the firearms community in QPR gatekeeper training. And we also provide a personal safety plan that actually helps to address risk factors and increase protective factors. But I want to end on this thought, and that is that suicide awareness is presented under the umbrella of gun violence prevention. It sends a message to people struggling with ideation that they are in the same category as criminals plotting an armed robbery, and this creates stigma. I think we can do better in how we talk about firearms and mental health. And that is something that motivates me. And when I look at statistics, I always bring it back to people, and I remember people, and I remember the veterans whom I love. And I would never want for them to think that when they're learning about suicide prevention, that we think of them as criminals. And so it is my joy to be in this space and to encourage and empower gun owners to make life-affirming choices. Thank you.
Rachel, I think you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Just wonderful sharing, Sarah. This, it actually gives us a conclusion of, the deeper understanding of what is suicide prevention and how this gun violence can create a huge impact. And you have been a wonderful community leaders that giving hope for those who want support, and they're really a lot of lonely people out there. They're seeking for the resources. So thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing that. So now we are going to open up the floor for Q&A. If you have any question for our panel, please post it below the comment sections. And for us to tee up these discussions, I'm going to throw out some of a few questions for each of our speakers. So let's start with Dr. Megan Otoli. How about start with you? So the first question I have here is, what is your hope for this report? The report that you share with us and the impact it can have in our communities.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Rachel. I hope first and foremost that folks can see this research and understand the ways in which gun violence impacts cities as well and people that are living in them. I'm not sure that this has been a part of the conversation in ways that it really needs to be in order for us to address this big public health challenge. I want city leaders to recognize this too, so that they can consider how they might allocate resources properly. One other thing is that I think it's important that we expand our understanding of who credible messengers are. Different communities will find messages resonate better with certain individuals, and being able to recognize how those communities are being impacted by gun violence and gun suicides is key in that.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. All right, now, Kelley, this question for you. As a gun violence survivor and person who works in this area, what have you found to be the most helpful and resourceful when discussions suicide prevention efforts?
I think just the number of resources that currently exist now that maybe didn't exist 33 years ago when somebody like me needed them. That gives me a lot of hope. I'm involved in the community here with the Veterans Administration because I worked for them, and also with the mayor, who is one of the mayors against gun violence, and we work on a task force together. So all that stuff helps.
Thank you, Kelley. All right, Sarah, you're up. I have a tough question for you.
Okay.
All right. So how can local gun shops and the firearm community at large support suicide prevention and safe storage efforts?
Well, it's our pleasure to welcome new gun shops to the Hold My Guns family. And so the first thing would be to get in touch with us at holdmyguns.org and reach out if you're a gun shop owner and you're interested in participating in our program. I think when it comes to the topic of safe storage, a moment ago I mentioned a personal safety plan, and that's really important. That's something that we're sharing with our gun shop partners and that we bring to us at gun shows. We've now distributed upwards of 8,000 copies of our personal safety plan, and you can download those on our social media at holdmyguns.org in the link tree. And what we want to do is create education around the importance of having a personal safety plan that includes identifying your personal risk factors and identifying your personal protective factors and elevating them, and then also having a plan for lethal means. You know, one of the things that I care deeply about is empowering gun owners. Gun ownership is normal, and so are ups and downs in life. And so what we want for people to do is to be empowered to seek help. And when people are afraid about, for example, being reported for an extreme risk protection order, it does cause hesitation for that individual to want to seek help because they're not sure how that would be received. And so having a personal safety plan that includes a plan for lethal means empowers that person. It promotes self-determination, and it gives them personal agency in the decision-making process for their personal struggles in life. And that safety plan also includes a plan for lethal means, which can include a Hold My Guns partner. So education is a really big component to promoting firearm storage. And I'm so grateful that our firearms community has embraced that and is promoting it. And I just encourage everyone, gun owner or not, to have a personal safety plan so that you're not just along for the ride, but you're in the driver's seat when you meet a moment of struggle in life.
Thank you, Sarah. So, Sarah, you earlier you talked about safe storage.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would like to understand, like maybe I think audience out there, you can tell us a little bit about what role does safe storage play in suicide prevention, and can you tell us a little bit more about gun safety at home?
Absolutely. So, it's very important to be just like we think about mitigating risks from outside threats. It's important to think about the risks that we have in our own home for mental health crises or times of stress. And so, especially during those times, we need to be mindful of how we're feeling, how people in our home are feeling, and take extra steps to ensure that there's not unauthorized access to firearms that can result in a firearm suicide. And so, having practices that cause a pause are very helpful, making sure that if a person is struggling, that they don't have access to firearms, and also making a personal choice to take stock to say, how am I feeling today? And it is a good idea for me to have firearms. Many people, it's a normal baseline thing to have firearms. Over 46% of American households are gun owners. So given that thought, then the idea is how can we educate people? And so thinking about changes to baseline are very important when thinking about access to firearms. And yes, having good storage practices in the home are important, but also having a community that supports that, to say that it is actually a strength to seek help. It's a strength to store firearms safely, that they're in a way that there's a pause. So we love to do that. I love to do it as a range safety officer and as a QPR instructor, and I'm grateful for the support of the firearms community for that as well in their education.
Great. So, Kelley, what do you think about Sarah's comment about this? I know you offer like support for those who survive from gun violence, and what's your thought on this?
Well, safe storage is an absolute must. And you would think, I live in Arizona and we jokingly call it Gunazona because there are so many guns. But through Everytown research, we learned that 4.6 million kids live in homes with unsecured guns. And so as a Be Smart leader, I go to first responders, to businesses, to doctors, to schools, to health fairs, to employee health fairs, all different kinds of places where we have tables and give out information on safe storage. And you would be shocked at how many people think safe storage means under the mattress, under the pillow, in dad's underwear drawer, up on the shelf in the closet, and they just don't know what safe storage really means. So it's really important, like Sarah said, and Nick too, to educate people about what that really means and how to do it. And a lot of people put the onus on their child to stay away from the guns. You know, we told them not to go near the guns. They know not to go near the guns and so on. And that's just not enough.
What do you think, Megan? Thank you, Kelley. So you are a researcher. Do you have any data to maybe back up on the safe storage? Is this a new idea, do you think?
No, I think that Kelley referenced a lot of the research that we have on this too, but we also see consistently that gun violence prevention laws, including ones that address secure storage, can save lives. So there is a real value in that, and helping folks understand what that looks like and how they can practice it in their homes is important as well.
That's wonderful. So Megan, so I have a next question for you, just related to the report you show us. So you highlight something, city with the most walkable neighborhood and park have approximately half the rate of people who die by gun suicide. And it's actually basically gun suicide in the city, right? At least. And can you speak more about, you talk about protective factors and how can this contribute to suicide after, like suicide safety for communities?
Sure. So when I am thinking about, or when we're thinking about protective factors in this report, we're looking at city level things that can be implemented or state level ones as well that can have an impact on city gun suicide prevention. And in particular, the walkability is a measure of access to resources. So ensuring that communities can have access to mental health care, to pharmacies, to social support, to different ways that they can be involved and connected is really key. And that's what we're seeing through this metric here. And then the parks, again, provide a lot of that too. Folks can have a chance to be in some quiet and meditate, to connect with folks and develop social support, to exercise. Various things that can all have a huge impact on mental health are provided through access to parks. So thinking about how we can increase these in cities, which communities are furthest from these and how we can put them there. And the idea that we should continue to study this in ways that we have looked at the impacts on gun homicides. Understanding the value for gun suicides is important as well.
Thank you, Megan. So I'm going to jump into Kelley for a moment. I have some questions. When you share your story, I'm just curious about your personal story, and then you have some information I'm sure is helpful for your local communities. What are the resources that you as a community members and leaders that you support your individual in the suicidal crisis?
What are the resources?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's a long list of resources.
Maybe you can summarize it, just a top 5.
Well, we do have, I do sit on the Mental Health Advisory Council at the Veterans Administration. So for veterans, there are lots of resources there. They give away gun locks. They have a safe storage program. I did present Be Smart to them. Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America is another resource that we use. Everytown.org has a lot of resources. So that would probably be my top ones.
Okay, great. So Kelley, one of the things that I think people might be asking about, like your story has created a huge awareness, I think, around people who have parents, right? They have kids. And what, after the incident with your kids, and what is the first action that you take, like basically you took for you to recover from that? If you might to share with us a little bit, because I'm sure there's many parents out there, they are kind of like in the limbo, not sure what to do when things happen to their kids.
Yeah, I just didn't know what to do. I mean, life totally took on a surreal quality, and I just felt like I was living in a Salvador Dali painting where everything was smeared and everything was distorted. And the only thing that I could think to do after I learned that there were some resources out there for grief survivors was to look in the phone book and find a grief counselor, which I didn't even know existed. And I took the step to do that. I started to attend grief groups. I started to learn that I wasn't alone and that there were other people like me who were survivors of suicide. And, it helps to know that you are in a community of people who have experienced what you have. And that really helped me, because that was kind of a lifeline for me. Otherwise, had I not sought out help in those groups and in individual therapy, I don't think I really could have survived that.
Thank you, Kelley, for sharing that. This is very personal, I know, but I appreciate that. So now I'm going to open out questions for all of you. So who are the best messenger for firearm safety?
I think the firearms community. I mean, we are for gun owners by gun owners organization because we love gun owners and we care, and we approach, talking about suicide prevention and preventing unauthorized access from the perspective of fellow gun owners. And we're cheering for fellow gun owners to make life-affirming decisions and providing options such as hold my guns, or encouraging people to have a personal safety plan so that they are prepared. I'm so grateful for hearing Kelley's story, and there are many out there like it. And she's right; it's really hard in that moment to know, what do you do? In July, one of my sons got into a motorcycle accident, and that day began, like any other day. And thankfully, he's still with us. He was wearing his helmet. His bike was wrapped around a telephone pole, and he was thrown 25 feet into a rock retaining wall head first. And so we are really grateful that he's still with us. But the reality is we're all humans. And part of being humans and being on that journey is that life has ups and downs. And so in order to be able to meet that, we need the supportive community, and we need to plan and prepare ahead. And what better group of people for trying to reach gun owners to be prepared for life's ups and downs is to offer support through our own community. And that's how it is that we're making a difference in such an effective way, because of those shared values and care from within our own community. So we're grateful to have the opportunity to take leadership and be a voice on that.
Great. Megan, do you have any thought on this?
Yeah, if I can chime in as well, I'd be happy to. A lot of research has shown the value of doctors and primary care physicians in educating folks about secure storage and gun safety. And we also found through work that we did on this report that particularly as gun suicides are increasing in young Black men, police officers in some communities might be good, credible messengers. They might not in others. Same with gun shop dealers. And so in those communities, we found that folks who are constantly providing care and listening and mental health support are often barbers and beauticians, folks that work at libraries, community leaders that have been doing this kind of supportive work for decades in a different way can be really key here too. So finding ways to equip them with knowledge about recognizing signs of mental health challenges and what the resources and support services are is another important step.
Mm-hmm. I want to add something real quick to that too. And I just want to say that the firearms community is such a beautiful and diverse community, and that there are many, many groups of individuals that even address different people groups and different backgrounds. And so I would encourage, if there is a gun owner out there who is feeling isolation and they're feeling like they want to find a community to be involved with where they feel supported and understood, then Google and look for a firearms community that represents who you are. And there are many people out there who would be very welcoming and supportive. So I love that Meg brought that up, and I just want to put that out there in the context of preventing suicide by firearm.
Great. Kelley, do you have anything to add?
I just think education and more education and the knowledge about resources is tantamount to, people need to know what to do and where to go if something like this happens to them. And, I have this kind of fantasy of public service announcements, just like the smokers ones that you see on television, where they have a person who was a lifelong smoker that is missing part of a jaw or has a tube where they have to speak out of. People talking about suicide prevention on public service announcements on television and really bringing it out there, because this is a real problem that's happening in rural communities and in cities. And it happens to people like me. And it's not an up and down in life. It is a process of destroying a family. And it takes a lifetime to put the pieces back together. So people need to know about the harm that can come to families through suicide.
Great. So this leads to another question I have. What are your thoughts on the important access to local resources in building community of support?
Are you asking me?
Anyone, open to all.
So our gun shop partners are connected with community resources, anyone from, depending on what's available in that community, but that's part of our onboarding process, is to identify trusted resources in the community. So connecting them with veterans response teams, making sure that our local mental health and medical professionals are aware of this firearms storage service. And we even work with medical and mental health professionals and first responders to kind of have a script to know how to introduce the idea of firearm storage, and to show that there is a stigma-free resource that a gun owner can use if they need it. So I totally agree. Connecting with resources and having some reciprocity for referrals is definitely built into our plan. It's vital to connecting people to that kind of care.
Kelley and Megan, anything to add on this? No.
Well, I can say, yes, of course, resources are key. We found that, and it was represented through that walkability measure. We've seen it in other studies as well. I think it's another reason that it's important that cities recognize the scope of people who die by gun suicides within them. If we keep talking about it as a rural-only problem, then the resources are being built up there, but aren't as clear in cities, and that's important for us to change as well.
Sounds great. So Kelley, do you have anything to add? I know that you probably do a lot of local support as well for your community, right?
Yes, I do.
So what's your thought on this? Maybe you can share for people who are, again, like I like to mention about parents, and also maybe even school and university, right? They really need those local support, and people don't know where to go sometimes, even the resources available there.
Yeah.
So maybe you can share a little bit insight on your initiative on this.
Well, again, the Be Smart program goes out to all of those, any place that will have us, basically. We have tried to get it into gun shops. We have spoken to some gun shop owners here in Tucson. We are getting into schools. We are going and talking to parents. We are going to health fairs and kids events and different things like that. We have gone to police station and first responders to talk about the Be Smart program. And so, that's what we're doing locally. We go to big festivals and things like that happen. We even went to a Harley Davidson little party that they had in Phoenix and talked about Be Smart there. So we're really trying at the local level, and again, becoming involved and partnered with people like the VA here in Tucson, and the police department and the sheriff's department, and really getting the word out about Be Smart. We do have a yearly event where we talk about the impact of gun violence. It's called Wear Orange. So we do that. And we have continuing monthly meetings about gun violence prevention. So we are working all those angles at the local level.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelley. Just to wrap up, maybe the last two questions here. So this is open to all. What would you recommend for people who never involved in suicide prevention or even understand what is gun violence for the ordinary people? What would be the best way to create an awareness just around your home or maybe your local community? And what would be maybe one resources that you can recommend?
I think I would recommend taking a very humble approach when you think about suicide prevention and starting in your own home first before, there's definitely a place for reaching out to community, but we don't want to be hypocrites. We want to make sure that with our own children that we have a good relationship and that we don't just talk to them through a closed door, but instead we prioritize family time without screens, that we are aware of what's going on in our kids' lives, whether they have a breakup or if they have a really big test that they're studying for, and we let them know that they are loved and supported, and that there are going to be situations where they might fail in life, but that we love them and that we'll get through it together. And so starting in the home to just really make sure that we're fostering a place where people feel safe and heard to have hard conversations. And then from there, going out to the community and also recognizing in hindsight that there are things that we didn't know at one time that we know now. And so, that's a really hard thing once you experience a loss to suicide, that you're always thinking, is there something that I could have done differently? And giving yourself grace in that. And then seeing people who you're trying to reach as fellow humans and just being there in the trenches with them and not just preaching facts, but instead saying, hey, on this emergency safety plan, I can be your contact. I care about you, and I want for you to make life-affirming choices, even though things are really hard. And I think that's the best way to reach the community on a level that is led by compassion.
Great, Sarah. Megan, do you have any resources, maybe a report that you can share with the public in regard of creating more awareness around suicide prevention, even talking about gun safety?
Sure, I'd be happy to share some links to everytownresearch.org, where we have lots of different reports, and also the setup of the website is really great, where you can type in specific issues or solutions that you're interested in learning about and see all of the research there. But maybe I will pass it to Kelley if she wants to do one more plug for Be Smart, because I think that's a really valuable tool here. And it's important. I'm a researcher, numbers speak to me, but human impacts and stories and connections matter so much here. So I can add that support, but I think Kelley and her work is vital here.
Well, numbers speak to me as well. I was a safety analyst for a government organization before I became a suicide survivor. And, I learned so much about the fact that I was a statistic and I didn't want to be. And my son was a statistic and I didn't want him to be. But I am. So I'm trying to raise awareness to other parents so that they don't fall into the situation that I was in as a survivor of suicide. So with Be Smart, what we do is we use the acronym SMART: secure all weapons, model safe behavior around guns. A lot of people do not do that. And that's why we have so many deaths by firearms every year. Ask when your child goes to somebody else's house if they have firearms, and if they do, are they properly secured? And then ask them how they secure their guns. Because again, if they say it's under the pillow in the bedroom or in dad's underwear drawer, that's not secure. The R in SMART is recognize the roles guns play in suicide. And finally, the T is to tell other people about the program. So I give out those little cards, those little SMART cards at Halloween. My co-partner in Be Smart goes around the neighborhood and talks to her neighbors about living in a smart home. And again, we are at many town events and festivals, and I sit on a lot of different panels that discuss suicide prevention around the town. So I think, getting people to talk to each other, gun owners, and a lot of us are gun owners. I am not anymore, but a lot of people are, because there's a lot of sporting that goes on in this state that we live in. Getting us together, talk about these risk factors and what can be done is so important. And I think really that would be the key, along with education and announcements. about suicide prevention being bigger and greater for the general public.
Great. Thank you, Kelley. All right. I think we're going to wrap up with the last questions. Any one of you have maybe, I think there's education. I heard we keep on emphasizing about education program. So Kelley, you have mentioned about SMART program, and any other program out there you think people should reconsider and, start taking some actions, perhaps just to self-learning, about what exactly it's suicide prevention and also like gun violence and all that in related to this topic. If you have any maybe insight on this or sharing about the program that you have done, I think it might be a good idea to just share with our audience out there.
So I love the work of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and they have a wonderful program called Project Child Safe. And there are many videos in that about securing firearms, ways to do that, ways to get a free gun lock. And there are also some very thought-provoking videos on preventing teenage suicide and looking for risk factors particular to children and teenagers. And I think that all parents should be aware of those risk factors and have the tools that they need in order to secure firearms. So Project Child Safe, which is part of National Shooting Sports Foundation. And I want to say that the NSSF puts on SHOT Show in Vegas, and we will be there in January. So we're looking forward to continuing just to elevate the message of firearm storage, but also to save lives, protect property, and preserve rights, and to do it in a way that is gun culturally informed, so we can actually reach the people who are at risk for suicide by firearm.
Thank you, Sarah. Megan and Kelley?
Sure, I can add a couple more. Kelley referenced Moms Demand Action, and we have Students Demand Action groups as well, which have chapters across the country. And so you can go online and see when and where there's a meeting that you can stop by and learn about that work and the impacts of gun violence broadly as well. Everytown also has a group of mayors against illegal guns. And so for city leaders that are looking to address and understand the scope of this public health problem, they can see those resources as well and join that coalition.
Anything else to add, Kelley? That's all. All right. Thank you so much for our amazing speakers today. Kelley, for your bravery and disclosure, and Dr. O'Toole, for your research and care for this important topic, and for Sarah, who offer important insight into the firearm community. I truly appreciate you being here with us. And so for more information, if you want to learn about our speaker, their respective work, you're welcome to see the information in the description and visit their website on the social. This weekend, we are going to invite you to come to our suicide loss survivor and those who care for them to our next live stream, our Healing After Suicide Loss Summit, the Healing Through Action, a tapestry, a loss survivor voice. Registration is now available at suicidology.org, or you can contact info@suicidology.org for more information. And join us next Thursday for our next Lunch, Learn, and live stream featuring panelists, discussions, education to action, policy and advocacy for suicide prevention. All right, with that, thank you again for all who attend our live event today, and also thanks again to our amazing speakers. So if you want to learn more about AES, feel free to come to our website, suicidology.org, and hope to see you next time. Take care, everyone.